right. I'm excited to be here today with my new friend, David Andrew Wiebe. David, let me give you a quick intro. David, we were joking backstage how he was like the head lead on the musical touring in the USA for Hot Chicks. I don't know why that was like, it was like a little joke. Really, I'm just buying time right here. We're probably going to edit this part out of the podcast itself because it's like, well, this is just a weird way to start. But
Yeah.
David, let me do a quick introduction. So David composed the acclaimed work, The Nobody Prayer, and other award-winning pieces. He's an author of 13 plus books on music, creativity, entrepreneurial growth, and he hosts a popular podcast and consults with artists to systematize their growth, monetization, and fan engagement. So I'm excited to have him on the podcast today to talk a little bit about the current landscape of being an indie creative artist. You know, how do you create music in a sustainable way without losing your soul? Especially in a world with AI, it's getting so good. It can really pretty easily. I think the fear is that it could replace some of the artistic qualities that we love and the reason we make music. So looking forward to connecting today, and I appreciate you taking the time to be on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this.
Awesome. So to kick things off, would love to hear just a little bit about your background and how you started to consult with other artists and start teaching on the topic.
Well, there's a long version and a short version, as you can imagine, but I'll try to do the long version in a short way. So when I was 13, I lost my father in a motorcycle crash. And I was always artistic as a child. I engaged in a lot of visual art, arts and crafts and things like that. After my father passed away, I needed to find a new way to express myself. And music revealed itself as the way to give a voice to the words, the thoughts, the feelings that I could really not express in any other way. And at 15, I was at summer camp. Summer camp is kind of a theme for me in my teens, or at least in my early teens and maybe early adulthood. I went up and did a rap with my friend. It was like a talent show type thing on a Friday night. And I had such a great time. Like, it's not like our performance was great, but everyone was clapping and cheering and they loved it. And we walked out of the venue like we had planned. And then someone came chasing after us, like one of the camp counselors going, "What are you guys doing?" And it was just, "Oh, we just planned to walk out once the performance was over." So they were concerned for a hot second. But that's the moment I decided, gee, I'd really love to do this. I'd like to perform for the rest of my life. So I engaged in probably for the better part of 12 years or so. I was an independent artist. I guess you could say I still am. I still make music. I still play music. I still play my guitar just about every single day. But I'm not, quote unquote, in the fight at this particular moment in time, constantly recording or putting myself out there gigging. But for about 12 years, I was hot pursuit of making the kind of life that I wanted out of my creative career. And I was a full-time musician during that time. Very humble, right? Like cobbling together different tiny little income streams and just making the most of the opportunities available, such as teaching. And that's really about the time that I came across network marketing. And it's not that I became a network marketer, but I went into the system with an open mind, willing and interested in learning. And I was exposed to various books and various audio programs, learned Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and the cash flow quadrant. We could dive into each of those topics, to be honest. But I learned so much of that stuff that I realized, for me, at least, this is what I was missing. And if I'm missing this, other musicians are probably missing this too. And that's what's preventing them from creating the type of life they want or success they want in their music careers. And that's when I began making that transition over to, I think I've had a pretty big epiphany about this. And my career was all right, but I think people can stand on my shoulders and see further. And so it's worth putting this information out there to help musicians and help artists make it to the next level.
Awesome. Oh, thanks for sharing that. And I mean, what I'm hearing you say is that you have been there for like 12 years, where you probably can relate to a lot of the artists and folks who are watching this right now, in terms of cobbling together, different income streams, making ends meet. But it wasn't until really you started to assimilate some ideas from external industries and other thought leaders that you started to realize, wow, this was a thing that was missing from the music industry and from myself. And yeah, I'm definitely curious to hear more about both of those frameworks that you just shared, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and the 4 quadrants. Um, it's been a while. I need a refresher, but I remember reading the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad and being like, this is really smart and this is very needed. And I remember some of the general broad strokes around assets, versus liabilities. Would love a refresher. And for anyone who's listening to this right now, who maybe they're in that state where it's like financially, what's one of the biggest challenges is learning, how do I do this in a sustainable way? And I want to be creative, but like, I know in order to focus full time on music, I need to figure out this money issue. What would your advice be for them?
Yeah. Fascinating thing about Rich Dad Poor Dad, I think its message has been restated in different ways through, like, even before the existence of Rich Dad Poor Dad. I think another great book is Winning Through Intimidation. It has a weird title, but the book itself talks about the rich uncle, and basically the thesis of Rich Dad Poor Dad being that his dad, his biological father, was poor. He worked his butt off. He showed up to work. He did what everyone said to do, which is to get a good education, go and get a secure job, work hard in that environment, and eventually you'll rise to the top. And he followed that formula. And so his biological father was not rich. He made some money, of course. He was able to support his family, but that's about it. And so his rich dad was his mentor. That was the person that taught him another way of thinking, another way of behaving, another way of doing things. So a lot of us are not like Kiyosaki is really smart for having made that distinction, because most people would not. They would resist it. They would say, well, you don't think like my dad, therefore I'm not going to listen to you. That's where most people land on this. So they hear someone like me talking and going, David, you're just coming from another world. You're an alien, and I don't understand what it is you're trying to bring here. And it doesn't look like what I'm familiar with. Exactly. Because you can read any book. You can listen to Earl Nightingale or read Napoleon Hill and Think and Grow Rich, and you're going to find that to be or to get different kind of results in your life, you're going to have to approach things differently than everyone else is. If you see mass movement, turn and run the other way. And, people like Dan Kennedy followed that early in his career, because Earl Nightingale says, if you see everyone doing one thing, go and do something else. Dan Kennedy had no other guidance in his earlier career. So what he did was he stopped, he observed, and he watched what everyone else was doing and identified all the things that weren't working. So Rich Dad Poor Dad is very much in the same vein, that if you want a different life, if you want to create something different, if you want to be extraordinary or stand out, that you really require a different way of thinking, doing, and behaving. Is kind of how I've come to codify it. The cash flow quadrant is a concept, again, introduced by Robert Kiyosaki. And I think he kind of skims over it in Rich Dad Poor Dad and dives deeper into it.
Is it all right if we just reflect a little bit on what you just shared quick before we dive into that? Because I mean, there's so much gold in that, and it's just like an interesting observation. I think it's almost like paradoxical in that we're wired to look at social proof and want to kind of like fit in and belong. But it sounds like what you're saying, like one of the core insights of the book and one of the core insights in general for the most successful people is that in some way they went against the grain. They went against, they were like the square pegs in the round holes that Apple referred to in their early commercial. Like they did something different, and it's counterintuitive because, you have to extract yourself from that environment or to be able to see things differently. I'm curious, how how do you recommend that people kind of discern the difference between what the crowd or the community has correctly identified versus those rare opportunities where they actually can, I don't know, see something that for some reason everyone else is like just not seeing? Like, do you think that there's certain indicators that kind of might give a compass or point that person in the right direction? Or is it just a question of like, what do I believe that's contrary to the popular belief?
Mm. Well, you said a good word there, discernment. Discernment is a very valuable tool, and it's something that we should all develop. I don't know if you would call that a skill. I don't know if you would call it experience, but it's something that you want to refine over time. When you're reading books, when you're listening to courses, when you're taking new programs, everything needs to be questioned. And so that's what one of my coaches, James Schramko, would define as question everything. Be willing to question everything. Also, another great term that I think Derek Sivers, who I've read all of his materials, but Derek Sivers would say, trust but verify, right? Trust what people are saying, but go and check. And that's the key. So it comes down to who are you going to listen to in this world? Who are you going to listen to? And it should be people who are at least on the path to getting what you want or already have what you want. Go and talk to those people, but you got to verify too. You can't just take it at face value. And it's also a thing of just because what is the holistic result that they have? You have to look at that too, because some people they might make lots of money, but are not happy, or they make lots of money, but they're busy working 80 hours a week and don't have time for relationships and friends and all this other stuff. Is that the lifestyle you want? And if yes, follow that person. But if no, then we need to look for alternatives. So the indicators are usually there to some extent, but I would not say that I'm the most recognized musician coach. I would not say that I'm the most acclaimed musician coach or artist coach. People would have to dig to find me. That's the reality, because the people who are most visible might be excellent marketers, may not be the best coaches. And so this is where looking for those types of indicators is crucial. Testimonials is always good, but again, those can be easily fabricated. So the real test usually comes down to, do they have what you want?
Mm. Yeah, that's super interesting. So what I'm hearing you say is that that word discernment is really important. In that, really, what you want to do is don't really believe anything too much. Have trust in trust in yourself and trust in the world, but also verify everything and be open minded and ask questions. Question everything. And yeah, I mean that just seems like a valuable mindset across like every domain. I imagine just like having an open mind, be willing to learn. In fact, I mean, it seems like that's a recurring theme in a lot of different success principles, is around like an open-mindedness or a willingness to learn, a willingness to fail, willingness to figure it out. So like trust in your ability to figure stuff out, but not overly trusting any one point of view or believing like this is the only way. And it does seem like that kind of gives you that discernment where you can verify it on your own, and sometimes things will work for you that don't work for other people. So a lot of wisdom there. Okay, so that was a good deep dive. Now maybe coming back to the those 4 quadrants you're talking about as it relates to Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Definitely. The cash flow quadrant is a very easy way of understanding the 4 different ways that a person can create an income. And on the left side, you got E and S. And E would refer to employment. That pretty much includes any kind of traditional work or jobs you can name: retail or desk jobs or blue collar jobs, any jobs. S would be specialist or self-employed. So a specialist could include like a doctor or a lawyer, somebody who's gone to school for a long time to get their credentials, but also somebody who is maybe a freelancer or works from home or has their own business, but hasn't quite transitioned over to what we would call big business. So ES on the left side, BI on the right side. B refers to the big business. I think Kiyosaki defines this as 500 employees. So the jump from S to B is actually pretty gigantic when you look at it that way. But that's where entrepreneurs are. And and also the quadrant is split on the left and the right side for a reason. The left side is where people make less money. The right side is people who make more money. So transitioning over to becoming the owner of a business is where we want to be. And then you got I below the B. So on the right side of the quadrant, B and I. The I refers to an investor. And we can't like a lot of people feel like they could be an investor or they can invest now. And don't get me wrong, everyone should start investing now. Even musicians, they should start investing towards their future into something that has a reasonably good chance of giving them a nest egg that they can somewhat rely on. But you can't really invest at the level of Warren Buffett. You can't really invest at the level of some of these, the Charlie Munger or some of the biggest investors in the world without capital. And so a big business with 500 employees, if you're doing it right, should provide the kind of capital, the millions of dollars you need to actually invest. We can all trade or swing trade or day trade. We've got options. There's crypto, there's stocks. We've got a lot of options out there, but we're going to be limited by being able to invest hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars. The really big, like if you really want to benefit from investing, you need millions. You need capital to work with.
Awesome. That makes sense. So, so the 4 quadrants are on the left side. It's more about trading your time
Yes.
for money. And on the right side, it starts to flip into asset generation, ownership, building systems or things that run that provide value with or without you.
Great
And
distinction.
ultimately, becoming an investor is where you can gain kind of these multiples because, yeah, it doesn't rely on you, but also it takes some time to go into that quadrant because, like you're saying, like you need the capital to be able to invest. And so, am I hearing you correctly that really like the main recommendation as a starting point would be figuring out how do you produce cash flow or produce revenue, even if it maybe starts with like you're producing it and eventually you want to transition so that you're providing that value without you necessarily being the one doing it. And the ultimate, in terms of asset generation is when, your capital is working for you because you're investing and investing into good ideas and things that provide value without you necessarily having to do the actual day to day.
Yeah, absolutely. And like kind of the formula is basically this, like in an ideal world, we'd all make that transition over to the right side of the quadrant. But the formula that most people follow is, first of all, they get a day job. So they are firmly in the E quadrant. They spend their evenings and weekends in the S quadrant doing something that either maybe it could be a second job, but in some cases, but for many people, it's like their side hustle or their freelancing gig or their additional sources of income. And then they cut expenses. They reduce to the point where their life is streamlined. They might buy a 10-year-old car. I still drive 10-year-old cars, by the way. I took that training to heart. They might live in an apartment. I live in a two-bedroom basement suite. It's nothing fancy. I still live the same thing that I was living before. I haven't quickly elevated my lifestyle a little bit because I have comforts that weren't available to me before, but this training I've very much taken to heart. And then you create enough capital to launch a business. You create the kind of business that has the potential to be sold, and then you might repeat that step. But like that's where you make that transition to investor. So that's generally how the steps end up working. And for artists, the S quadrant is where you are, and you may have to begin the process by being an E, being an employee, being in employment, but spending your nights and weekends. It's exactly what Gene Simmons said, right? He said, I'm lucky any day I get to play music, never mind being a professional. So he spent his evenings and weekends. This is where, and really the weekends, because he's like, nobody's out, nobody's coming to see a show on a Monday. So that's where you would put your time and effort as an artist.
Cool. Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is that, you need to start out, somewhere. And usually you start out by investing the time that you have in, creating a revenue generating business. But over time, you start to, build something that runs with or without you, something that has value on its own that you can sell. And I guess one important point that you brought up as well was around lifestyle management and sort
Yes.
of like living below your means, keeping your expenses in check. I feel like I would love to dive a little bit deeper into that. Seems like that's a recurring theme in like successful people is
Yep.
not like often it's a trap to want to spend a lot of money to have the appearance of being wealthy, and that actually is like causes people to lose their wealth, whereas like the really wealthy people, they live below their means and they are very like frugal, and then they might be very humbly wealthy. So yeah, I would love to hear you talk a little bit more about that distinction.
Absolutely. We also refer to that as streamlining. That's what I was taught in the network marketing circles. So streamlining your life. And it's really about looking at what are like necessities and what are not things that would be considered necessary in your life. And a lot of people have trouble defining that. So I usually like to give them categories as well. So Netflix is not necessary. Prime Video is not necessary. You don't need streaming sites. And if you really insist on having to have a subscription, I would say Udemy. Get a Udemy subscription so you're actually spending that time learning something. And it's not like
Yeah.
you're going to learn things that are necessarily going to cause breakthrough in your career, but you can pick up extra skills, or you can learn a little bit of extra about online marketing or social media or podcasting or whatever you're into. At least it's then productive and something that has the potential to pay off in the long run.
Yeah, that's a great distinction. I mean, because that's talk about swinging against the current too. Because like, I don't know what the exact stats are. Maybe you know, it's like a crazy amount of time that's spent watching TV and
Yeah.
Netflix. So if the only takeaway that someone got from this right now is they just canceled, their Netflix subscription and they said, okay, I'm going to spend that hour per day or 2 hours per day learning XYZ, skill. Gosh, that would be a huge multiplier.
It would. Yeah. I think the stat is all the way up to 7 to 8 hours a day of TV, which is really replaced by Netflix, YouTube, TikTok, right? It's in different categories now, but when you add it all up, it's like that's a third of your day.
Wow.
So that means a third of your day is going to things that have nothing to do with your passion or creative pursuit or what you're trying to create. Well, there's your 8 hours. People are looking for the time. That's the time that you're not using towards the things you want to create. So those 8 hours are kind of a big deal.
Mm.
And
So maybe one quick question related to that, because what comes up for me when I hear that is both I can relate as someone that like, I there are TV shows that I've watched I really enjoy, and the idea of like canceling Netflix or canceling TV might bring up a certain amount of fear or concern, or almost sort of like oh, but yeah, I might be losing something, or I might not enjoy that. Do you have any recommendations for like habit change that someone who's listening or watching this could maybe take to explore such a foundational lifestyle shift, but actually make it stick? So that rather than just kind of hearing this, like, oh, that is a good idea, but like never actually going and doing it, that they can actually create some sort of like trial period or something to give it a shot.
yeah, that's really interesting. I guess it's kind of the whole Band-Aid off thing, right? We know it's going to hurt to take such a radical action. And maybe it's a thing of you give yourself half an hour, right? Half an hour, maybe go before bed or something like that, to just either watch Netflix or watch YouTube or something that you enjoy. I don't think there's harm in necessarily in, I mean, it's really good to laugh. I would recommend comedies. I would recommend staying away from horror. I mean, there's a lot of junk in comedies too. And remember, your subconscious mind absorbs every single thing indiscriminately. It's not like you get to turn it off. It's not like you get to say, oh, I watched this movie, but my subconscious mind didn't absorb it because I was not paying attention. It's exactly why it's absorbing it, because it's in the most relaxed state when you're in that kind of state. So unfortunately, there's no indiscriminate or there's really no neutral content. And we have to begin programming in a positive direction. But I think just think of it perhaps as a trade-off. Like, okay, I'm going to watch something for an hour, but I'm going to go make something for 2 hours. So for every hour of content that you watch, go actually spend time 2 hours making something, because we want to be creators, not consumers. And usually we're too far on the side of consumers, and it's fine to consume. We all do, but how can we tilt the scale in our favor a little bit? And that's going to come down to creation. And the more you create, the better that's really going to get.
Mm, good stuff. Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is that it's good to maybe there's a few different approaches you could take to pull off the band-aid, but maybe one way to do it would be to do it gently and to just limit the amount down to a smaller amount of time and just think about it like a trade-off. So it's not like you're sacrificing this and getting nothing from return, but really think through what's the joy and what's the creative output that you get from doing it. That makes a lot of sense. And one idea that I want to contribute as well is been on a kick lately around the ability to do trials, like trial periods or trial projects, like experiments, where there's something. It almost feels like a cheat code or something to like our human psyche, where if we can approach something and think about it as this isn't permanent, this is just something I'm going to try for X period of time. Maybe it's 30 days as like a 30-day trial. I can see that being a helpful addition to this as well, as saying, I'm not going to permanently, remove everything for now, but I'm just going to try it for a month and see what happens if I stop watching TV at night and instead I use that space to do something else, read a book or go for a walk or be creative. That might be a angle to look at it as well.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's a short-term sacrifice anyway. Any creative venture is going to be 2 to 5 years of like honest, hard, dedicated, daily, consistent work. And that's why for many people it actually takes 10 years, because the first 2 to 5 years they're spending time waffling and committing and half foot in and half foot out and 1 foot in and 1 foot out. And from the moment they did make the decision, they decide, they cut off all other possibilities. That's when it's truly 2 to 5 years until they see some return on what they've put time into. But it still has to align with your purpose and your mission. And that can sometimes be the longer part of the journey. One of the reasons why it can take 10 or 15 or 20 years is because you don't know your purpose yet. My purpose has a lot to do with what I said earlier about my father passing away at 13. If I'm robbing people, if I don't talk about that and why that matters, and in fact, might be one of the reasons why I need to make my audience youth or really parents, because I have a feeling my future is going to be more and more about working with youth and helping them at a critical time in their life when creativity, the system wants to beat it out of them. But when their parents should be encouraging them to become the unique individuals they are.
Wow. That's powerful. I appreciate you sharing that. It reminds me of, I don't know who brought up this point, but I've always resonated with it, which is that if you're looking for a compass towards your purpose or like a mission or your fulfillment in life, one clue is to think back to like your darkest rock bottom moment and the most challenging thing that you've been through, and think through if you could go back to yourself at that point and like give yourself whatever you needed most, like in that moment, what would it be? And then if you can do that for other people who are experiencing that right now, that it brings you real fulfillment, real joy. Gosh, I mean, I just thinking about that concept makes me feel emotional, because I can relate to that, and it's why we're doing what we're doing now. And I know that what you just shared too, that's probably part of that connection, part of that purpose. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Absolutely. I'm glad I get to share it.
Cool. So, one thing that you just brought up that I think is worth reflecting on and going deeper into is how important it is to make a decision, and how that really means just going all in on something, cutting off, other options. And once that decision is made, now you can kind of shorten a learning curve from 10 or 15 years of waffling to 2 to 3 years of like actually making it happen. So could you share a little bit more about that idea of like, decision making, why that is such an important, thing to get to, and maybe some guidance towards how can someone that is currently in that waffling state and hasn't made a decision, how do they get that clarity to be able to decide, what's right for them?
Yeah. First of all, it's accepting that there's nothing wrong with you if you're going through that waffling phase.
Mm.
I don't know a single person who doesn't or hasn't. And it truly is. Sometimes people get into a business and they're ready, but they're already because they already spent 5 to 10 years waffling before that. They were not fully committed.
Mm.
So making the decision, this does not typically occur sitting at home. This typically does not occur talking with friends. It more often than not happens at events.
Mm.
People go to events and they see someone on stage and they say, I could do that. If they could do it, I could do it.
Mm.
I had one of these moments not too long ago, and it's not like I don't know if that was the crucial moment I made the decision, but it was still a moment where I said, "Huh, if he's up there, I could be up there." And that was going to see Elvis Costello performing solo, and I said, "He's good, but I could imagine him playing at my local open mic." To be perfectly honest. So if I could imagine him playing the local open mic and I'm playing the local open mic, we could trade places just as soon, couldn't we? And he's an incredible songwriter. I could never take that away from him. And he's definitely got that. Kind of Bob Dylan's got that too. And I don't have quite that level of talent, or at least it would take me a long time to put together a masterpiece like the way they've written. So we have to go out there and we have to see what people have done and what they've been able to accomplish, because that's where decisions are made. Very frequently, it's not reading a book, it's not listening to a podcast, and these are all helpful. These will plant seeds for you, but decisions don't happen there. And so we need to go out there, music conferences or whatever is available, even a workshop in your locality. And I think that's where, and it's not about comparison, right? It's not about looking at what someone else has done and feeling insecure about yourself. It's about, gee, I'm pretty sure I could do that too.
Mm.
And so when the decision is made, I think it just changes everything. You're closing the escape hatch on other backup plans. You're basically saying no to the backup plans at that point. You're burning the ships because you're not going to go back to them. You've landed, and whether you enjoy the new place that you've landed or not, you're making a commitment to move forward. And that's what it looks like.
Mm. Good stuff. Yeah. So, I mean, kind of full circle to the conversation we're having at the beginning around, in order to do extraordinary things, you have to be extraordinary and you have to do things differently. Like you can't just do what's ordinary. Like you literally you have to do something different. And if you're just doing the same things you're always doing, then like, why would something different happen? Like, why would you change something? So what I'm hearing you say is that a lot of times those changes in your life, make the transformations happen when you actually get up out of your normal environment, your normal day-to-day life. And whether that's attending, an event, that's somewhere out that puts you out of your normal day-to-day routine, your normal thought patterns, or seeing examples or case studies of people that have done, something that you want to do that resonates with you, realizing that, you could do that too. That's really one of those cornerstones to how you create transformation is you have to do something different. You have to create a change. And so it's an interesting way to think about it. Like going to events, um, events in general are just sort of like an interesting concept. Like everything is kind of an event, um, but events themselves, like we normally think of them, are really an opportunity for a special happening to come together.
Yeah.
And events like events a show, and events, a conference. This podcast is an event of sorts. We are, creating a meeting, and here we are, whoever is listening to this right now, like we're all here together, like kind of like our, I'm to get too like metaphysical here, but like our consciousnesses are like touching in time and space right now in one moment, and this is like an event, and hopefully, hopefully this is the type of event that maybe someone was listening to you talk and they heard you share an idea, and that was a different idea that reframed an idea is something they were thinking about in their own life, and they go home and they say, I am going to try not watching TV for a month, or not scrolling on social media for a month, and use that time to be creative. And it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Thank you. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, David, this has been a lot of fun. I feel like we've covered some great ground in terms of both some more like conceptual but foundational pieces around creating a healthy, sustainable life and music career, and some like very tactical ideas and ways that someone could literally like walk away from this and get back years of their life focused on doing things that are more in alignment with who they are and what they really want. So thank you for being here and sharing all this. And curious for anyone that is listening or watching this right now that is interested in connecting more with you and potentially working with you, what does that look like, and what's the best place for them to get in touch?
Yeah. If you listen this far, you've had the chance to get to know who I am and a sense of my character and the kind of work that I do. And I would suggest that your next step would be to go to indiecareerformula.com. That's INDIE, career formula, indie as in indie rock. And you'll find that we've got a few things available, but basically what I'm encouraging people to do, since if they've already listened to this, they already know who I am. There's a little bit of information on the website, but bottom line, it's not long sales copy that you're going to read through and like be convinced. No, I expect that either you're already in or you're out, and that's perfect. So you're going to go to indiecareer.com. You're going to set yourself up with a silver membership, and the cost is nominal to get started. And you get access to 4 of my courses. You get a members only forum. You get members only audios. You even get a copy of my book and monthly newsletters. And it is a membership. It is a subscription, but you get to start at a very nominal fee as well. So that's where I would go, indiecareerformula.com, and you'll get the information as far as what the membership entails and what you get as a member. And that's the journey. That's where we start.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks for sharing. And like always, we'll put all the links in the show notes for easy access. And I would bet a lot of money on the fact that if somebody who's listening or watching this right now is an indie musician, is looking for, what we talked about during this conversation of getting new ideas, new perspective to be able to better invest in their time and energy into their music, they're going to get a huge return of their value by just taking whatever they're currently spending on like Netflix or something else and joining a membership like what you offer and actually learning more. So thanks again for being here on the podcast and sharing some of those lessons, and looking forward to connecting again soon.
Yeah. Thanks so much for hosting, Michael.